It's great to see you all again. I hope you have now sufficiently drained the coffee that was outside. We understand that it's time for a refill. Funny story about the coffee bar that we used to have. If anyone wants to know what happened to that, we're happy to share offline. So we are so pleased to see all of you here. I thought it was worthwhile pointing out that it's getting increasingly difficult for people to come to this conference just financially. It's hard. We have something like 1,200 people who are viewing online, which is great, and presumably even more in other venues too. But we really appreciate that all of you are here, and in particular for this next session. So for the last 5 years, Ambassador Rafael Mariano Grossi has served as the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, ably navigating numerous crises and challenges while also preparing the agency's staff for future opportunities, not least the potential, as we heard in the last session, for a significant expansion of the use of nuclear technology around the world and all of the implications that that carries. We're very fortunate to have someone of Director General Grossi's experience and expertise and steadiness at the helm of the IAEA during these, shall we say, interesting times for him. He has had an exceptionally distinguished career working on nuclear issues for the last 4 decades, much of it at multilateral agencies, and during his time as an Argentine diplomat. I'd point you to his bio in the app for a more fulsome accounting of his many accomplishments. We're very pleased to welcome him back to the Carnegie Nuclear Conference. Joining Director General Grossi on the stage to moderate the conversation is my friend, colleague, and new boss, Corey Hinderstein. Corey has been Vice President for Studies at Carnegie for about 2 months now, but brings incredible experience from her distinguished career as Deputy Administrator and Principal Deputy Administrator at the National Nuclear Security Administration, and before that as Vice President at the Nuclear Threat Initiative. It's great to have Corey as part of our team at Carnegie. Please join me in giving them both a warm welcome.
Good morning, everybody.
Hi.
Rafael, so happy that you could be here. We were just saying as we were waiting to come on that I think you're the busiest person I know. And I know a lot of busy people. But that's for good reason, right? The asks of the agency, I think right now in 2025 are more than they have ever been. And the agency has played an indispensable role for decades, so this is not something minor to say. So I'd like to maybe kick off with a general question before we hit the real hot spots that I know people are eager to hear about. How do you decide how to spend your time? There is more that you could be doing, and maybe some people would say they think you should be doing things in different ways. Yeah. How do you decide what your priorities are when the agenda is almost limitless?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you. It's great to be here. This conference is the place to be, we know, and to see you, with whom we worked in your different incarnations, as in mine, for many years. Congratulations on your new responsibilities. It's great to be here. Well, I think when it comes to, the agency, because of the circumstances that we are discussing here and elsewhere, has a real, as opposed to rhetorical contribution and perhaps responsibility to make on 2 or 3 of the most complicated hotspot crises that we are seeing in the world. So I think that imposes the priority. It's like me just following what needs to be done. And when it comes to what is happening in Iran, we're going to be discussing that, Iran and in other places where we have to be working. Of course, Ukraine and other places. One wishes to have a 36-hour-long day. It doesn't happen, but it is something that we do, of course, most of all with an enormous sense of responsibility. The responsibility that is on our shoulders to help avoid bad things happening.
Well, you mentioned Iran, and I think maybe I'd like to start there with this sense of responsibility. You were, the agency has obviously played an integral role, not just in implementing Iran's Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement, but then of course with the JCPOA, the additional monitoring. And, you know, we've seen the resumption of some sort of negotiation over the past couple of weeks.
Yes.
You went to Iran last week. One of the things you said on your departure was you felt like we were running out of time.
Yep.
Could you talk a little bit about your view of how the agency can contribute to finding a diplomatic solution with Iran, and maybe expand on what you meant by running out of time?
Well, the Iran issue is a long-standing one. We have seen, you've been working on that in the past as well. So we have seen different moments upbeat, moments of depression, moments of great dynamism, moments of optimism, and moments of deep pessimism. I would say this is a moment, if I had to characterize it, this is a moment which is fraught with opportunity, but at the same time, it's like we are walking a tightrope, all right? Because there is a process which is ongoing and which I believe we should all welcome, because the fact that we have, for the first time, the United States talking to Iran directly, indirectly. I mean, there's this waltz of, you know, the presence or absence and how to physically describe it, but it's going on, and it's a serious process that is going on. So, and we were coming from a relatively long period where the issue was not moving. But the fact that the issue was not moving did not mean that the centrifuges were not spinning, all right? So while we were all looking elsewhere or saying, well, you know, we'll have another meeting in 3 weeks or in 2 months, and then for the next Board of Governors of the IEA or whatever, on the margins of whichever summit, then the program in Iran was growing bigger and thicker and more ambitious and giving the latency the country has maybe reached already a real sense of imminency. So I felt when President Trump sent this letter to the Supreme Leader indicating a number of things, and the government of Iran replied. Of course, there were many things, quite controversial and antagonistic things that were said, but there was a common word, a common denominator on the simple word of negotiation, which I believe, you know, as a diplomat, I have to be professionally optimistic, even in the worst of circumstances. And when we see that there is the word negotiation, let's negotiate, well, this is what I'm clinging to. And seeing how to decline that, they are seeing how to decline that. I'm not driving anything. It's a US-Iran negotiation. The IEA is trying to help by virtue of what we have been doing there. We are the only ones there on behalf of the international community, inspecting, having our people there telling you and the rest what Iran really has and what we believe it may have, importantly, as importantly perhaps as the other part. So we are trying to contribute, giving our independent, impartial impression of what is there, and perhaps, hopefully, providing some more concrete ideas as the process evolves and it continues. We had already a second round. There was a first round in Oman. There was a second round in Rome. There's going to be a third one. So we see that the wheels are turning, and one could not judge because we are not privy to the internal negotiation, but the fact that there is a process and an interaction that is ongoing, it's important. What the other thing I said is that any agreement without verification is just a piece of paper. All right, so it's quite obvious that sooner or later we will have to be involved, and we will have to provide for the necessary inspections that will hopefully take place.
Well, and it's a good reminder when you say, you know, everybody else is talking, you're the only ones who are there. And the fact that you have been there and on the ground through everything is extremely important as a starting point for our understanding about what's really happening. It's the way the world knows, and I commend you for extraordinary transparency over the years on what you're seeing on the ground. Another area that has taken a lot of your time is Ukraine.
Yeah.
There are obviously so many new issues that arose with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Everything from how do you implement safeguards in a war zone to what is the role of the IAEA on behalf of the international community when it comes to some sort of not just knowledge about, but reason for the safe operation, continued safe operations of these facilities. Could you talk a little bit about how, given where we are today, how do you see the IAEA's role in Ukraine? And there was already one question that came in that said that you had made a statement about this non-war mode at Zaporizhia, and there have been lots of debate in the press about what you meant by that, but maybe you could expand on what you mean by the IAEA's role in non-war mode.
Yes, I mean, the whole operation that the IAEA has been having at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is unique, is absolutely unique, unprecedented by any metric. That means that we have to play, by ear on many things. The important thing for us was to get there, and once being there, to stay there. And staying there means a number of things. The first thing is that by being there, we have a deterrent factor. People know on both sides, this is a war, that the IAEA is there, and the IAEA has a tendency, if not a tradition, of telling it as it is. Whatever the political preferences and circumstances that may be. And I say this because sometimes people on one side of the debate or the other side of the debate are angry at me because I'm saying something. We are saying the things as they happen. So being there has prevented or helped prevent a nuclear accident. And I'm not saying, and here I think, and I want to stress again that you will never hear me say mission accomplished until there is a solid ceasefire, until there is, peace writ large, of course, would be ideal, but until the moment of that comes, there's an active combat zone there. And we've seen in the past almost 3 years that we have been there, numerous circumstances, occasions, where we had very serious close calls, from the cooling tower up in flames to direct bombing, hitting parts of the facility, to drone attacks and so on. So there have been 9 blackouts completely, and you know, as a nuclear expert, what it means to have the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe being cooled by emergency generators. People say, but they are the emergency diesel generators. Well, okay, yeah, you don't want to be at that last line of defense in a nuclear power plant ever. So this happened all the time. So the situation continues to be extremely fragile, and every day there's something happening about which you can read our public updates. The IAEA has also established 7 basic pillars and 5 principles, which I enunciated in front of the United Nations Security Council, getting at least acquiescence and support, I would even say, but no one opposing, very clear principles that, of course, they boil down to don't shoot. But it's presented in a more sophisticated way, of course.
That's why you're a diplomat.
It's a diplomatic thing. You have to, put some more words into it, or don't make a nuclear power plant a military base. Important as well, and easy to understand to everyone and by everybody. So we continue being there. Now it's clear that again, there is a process. There is a process which may or may not be successful. But this plant is, as you know, Corey, is on the front line. Isn't it? You have the Dnieper, you have the plant, and it's on Russian-controlled territory. In whichever scenario that we will have in the near future, there will have to be some status for the plant. in terms of course, legal ownership stays with Ukraine, but the reality is that it's controlled by Russia. And so how are you going to articulate it in particular when the next challenge is the restart of the plant? Because Russia has, of course, every intention of restarting the plant. And this is a very big machine that has been on cold shutdown for almost 3 years. The last reactor was stopped in September, if I remember correctly, 2022. So there's a lot of work in terms of safety assessment of what can be done, what could be done. And not only that, that is one thing that the agency could eventually help do if we are allowed to do that. But also for the sustainability of this operation, don't forget that a plant like this is fed and feeds numerous power lines. In the case of Zaporizhia, with this 6 gigawatts, 6 big nuclear reactors there, it used to have 10 around it, some going in the direction of what is still controlled by Ukraine territory, and some others in the other direction. At the moment, it's operating with one and a half. So if ever this is going to be restarted, there will have to be some stability so that the plant is not subject to loss of external power. With loss of external power, you lose cooling, you have a nuclear meltdown. All right? So all of these things are the things that we are looking at and that we are having conversations about with Russia and with Ukraine.
Well, and I think it's unfortunate that, with the war being somewhat off of the headlines most days now, our attention to this one 375 kilovolt line and the 750, we used to be watching that every day.
Yeah.
And now, so I think that the stability of the plant, is something that those of us in this community, I know, are continuing to pay attention to.
Yeah.
I hope that the world is as well. I'd like to turn to a couple of other issues that you deal with, because the IAEA is obviously an extremely complex organization with a lot of mission. And for a lot of countries that are member states of the agency, it's the other missions that actually mean the most to them.
Yes.
Even though they benefit every day by what you do to preserve peace and stability through the Safeguards mission. You've had some signature projects during your time as Director General. Atoms for Food, Atoms for Health, New Tech to address microplastics in the marine environment. How do you see the importance of those kinds of projects for the agency? And what is the push and the pull on you when it comes to addressing these kind of broader peaceful applications of nuclear energy?
Well, thanks for mentioning that, because that is also at the foundation of the IAEA, the Eisenhower statement of atoms for peace and all these phrases that when he was already mentioning medicine and agriculture and things like this. What we felt when I came to office was that all these efforts were not being channeled in the way they should, and we were not pulling all the resources that we needed so that the agency could help countries in this direction. One important one, for example, is cancer. And this is why we established the Rays of Hope project, trying to bring radiotherapy services to countries which do not have it. We are all used to this very dismal statistics and things, but nevertheless, it is useful to remind that, for example, in a country as big as the Democratic Republic of Congo, there is no single public radiotherapy unit. Congo, right? Not a single one. So when I hear that countries are saying that they are putting a lot of emphasis on health, and I've seen global, I don't want to identify, I'm a diplomat, which platforms, global platforms, regional platforms saying that now it's health. Well, I don't see it. I don't see it. So this is why we started these projects. We started with 7 countries. Now we are moving to, now we have 80
80.
80 countries knocking at our door. And this is why, after seeing you, I'm running to see Ajay Banga at the World Bank. We are working with him. We're working with as many people. You know, for Congo, shout out to the OPEC fund. It's the oil people that are giving me the money. I went there. We are neighbors in Vienna. I said, why not? I went there, and the president said, yeah, this is a good project. And we are building a hospital there. So all of these things are incredibly important. And I am grateful that you mentioned this, because in places like this of high political strategic sophistication, we forget that from the 180 countries that come to the agency, perhaps 20 are looking into the things that we were talking about just now, but 160, what they need is something else. And the nice thing about the IEA is that we are about project, you know. We are about not policies or declarations or goals, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is the great illness of multilateralism, talking a language that people do not understand. Say, you know, but the goal number 4A, it's going to be, people do not understand. People won't care. You know, a hospital radiotherapy unit, something that they can, you know, or food. And the IEA, in that being a technical organization, we have a project. We go to Rwanda, we go to Mali, we go to Burundi. We do a project. We put an irradiation system so that, you know, food does not go rot. It's very simple. So that's the idea. And you were asking how good are we doing? Perhaps not so much in the sense that I see all this demand that is coming on our way, and we are trying to mobilize as many resources as we can. And of course, we are sometimes overwhelmed by that. But I think the model is what sometimes appeals to the private sector. For example, in cancer, I go to the machines. I mean, we're all been touched by cancer, haven't we, in our families? You go to a place and what do you see? You see Elekta, you see Siemens, you see GE. So I go to them. I say, you know, you're doing these machines. Can you give me a CT scan or PET scan? Because I want to do this in that or that country. So this is what the effort is, and we will continue, of course.
Do they say yes?
They say yes. They say yes. It's interesting. And they say, why didn't you come before? So a bit self-criticism, but now we are doing it. So if you know somebody, let them know. But this is what we are doing. We are talking to everybody. We have to mobilize resources in this way. This is the dynamic way to do it. We cannot expect countries. We are times of great fiscal, I would say, austerity in many countries. So international organizations cannot be milking countries, non-stop. So we have to diversify, and we have lots of corporations, companies with excellent social responsibility policies that they're looking for good projects. So we have to make the match work, and to go to places and try to solve some of the problems.
Well, you just mentioned budget. I mean, it seems to me like for a long time there was such a push to increase the safeguards budget because of the increased demands.
Yeah.
And a lot of your needs are actually being met through extra budgetary contributions, where it seems to me like there's really a demand on both sides of the house now. Mm-hmm. Is it the time to, even in this current environment, is it the time to relook at whether the agency's budget as a whole needs to be higher?
I think it's a political decision that needs to be taken. Of course, especially now, when countries, and this country is one example, are rethinking not only whether to increase the budget, whether to continue budgeting or not certain operations. Yeah. I think, for one, heads of international organizations should not complain, because we are paid by the taxpayers, and we should answer every question that is asked from us. So that is one thing that I find perfectly legitimate. At the same time, there are certain things that are very, very important, and we have to recognize. And there has to be a happy combination between what is the assessed contribution that needs to be there from countries, because certain operations cannot be, unlike cancer or food, cannot be driven by extra budgetary contributions because of conflict of interest and all of the things that you can imagine. So it has to be an operation. It has to be, the thing is where you put your money, where you put your taxpayers' money. What is really important for a country? Is non-proliferation important for a country? That there are no more nuclear weapons really important for a country or not? Or is X, Y, or Z operation important? And then one can have a conversation. We hope, and I really hope that out of the current analysis and evaluations, organizations dealing with international peace and security and non-proliferation will be supported because there is a clear, I would say, matching between making America safer and, or any country safer, or the world safer, and the operation that is being carried out. But that being said, I think international organizations should also be self-critical. They should also look at mandates that sometimes are duplicative and have a look. You know, it's not bad that we are, I mean, anniversaries, what are anniversaries useful for? Is to remind us where we are and what we've done and what we want in the future. And for example, this year is 80 years of the UN. Okay, so we should maybe think what kind of thing we want in the future, what kind of approaches are useful for a world that has changed quite radically.
Yeah. Well, the future is obviously unclear, but you are trying to think about the future, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think are the next challenges? Not the next crisis, but the next challenge for the agency?
Yeah.
I know Project Atlas is one thing you're thinking about with regard to, you know, not just new reactor types, but new reactor use cases, right? What if there were reactors in commercial shipping, in some of these floating or marine-based reactors? So what are you thinking about the next challenges?
Many challenges. One, and all of them, I would say, positive, in the sense that they put us against demands and expectations. One thing is that, luckily, decades of negative narrative about nuclear energy are being sidelined. People, especially the young generations, don't come with this burden of, you know, thinking that nuclear energy is dangerous. Nuclear energy has a very safe record for whomever, you know, cares to look into the real figures of that. So now we see all this enthusiasm about nuclear energy, the possibilities that it brings, the fact that if we care for a decarbonized energy mix, nuclear has to be part of it in some countries, a big part of it in some other countries, perhaps not necessarily, but obviously there is this move. And with this move comes the innovation in nuclear and the possibility of having smaller reactors that are more mobile, that are less expensive. Nuclear has been a rather unattainable thing for many, I would say, poor nations, for middle-income countries in some cases. And now they see the possibility. And of course, hardly a week passes without me receiving an African Minister of Energy or an Asian Minister of Energy. And then they say, you know, I want my SMR, I want my MTV, I want my SMR. What should I do to get one? And there are certain things where the agency can help, because of course they're going to have the commercial vendors coming to them saying, my machine is fantastic, buy it, and then we can give them the safety, the security, the regulatory capabilities that are so important. So this is one thing on innovation. And then, as you were mentioning, there are other things that are happening. AI, for example. Our lives are dependent on artificial intelligence, on IT systems, etc. There's nothing that works in the economy without them. So the importance of data centers. And data centers, obviously, and all these companies, it is not by chance, it is not because they all of a sudden are in love with nuclear, it's because they are looking into something that is going to be reliable. Because they are, you know, power hungry, and you need dispatchability, and so on and so forth. So this is why AI, nuclear is or appears to be a match made in heaven in a certain sense. Not absolute, but quite compatible, very, very, very compatible. And there are other sectors. You were mentioning Atlas. Atlas is our project in shipping. You know, the shipping industry is looking onto nuclear. Shipping is responsible for a disproportionate degree of CO2 emissions, which I didn't know. I learned it when I started working on that. It's almost 10% of global emissions, not by sector, global. So only shipping, all right? So they themselves said we have to do something about this because this is not efficient, this is creating lots of problems. And of course, again, as internationally, we do know how to put a reactor at sea and making it work safely. The only thing is that we have been doing this for nuclear subs, not for, military, not for commercial fleets. So we are working now, and the table is so unusual for us because for the first time we are inviting shipping companies, the big shipyards in Korea, in China, in the United States, in Europe, the big container companies, the Mercks of this world, the ports are coming to the conversation because they are moving into this direction. So as you can see, because the IEA, unlike other organizations which are norm-driven, we are technology-driven, we are adapting to new things that are coming. And this is why suppose we have to continue working and doing more if possible.
I don't think you're going to be working yourself out of a job on that. Yes. I'm going to start turning to some of these audience questions, and the audience questions are always excellent. You're all beautiful and above average.
We know.
Some particularly good questions. But just a transition on that last one, and out of respect for my colleague Jamie Kwong, I'm asking her question first here, which is how can the IAEA contribute to reassuring the international community that nuclear-powered submarines by non-nuclear weapon states are not carrying nuclear weapons? So is there a role for the IAEA beyond the safeguards of the material in the reactor itself to answer some questions about
first of all, if you are thinking about non-nuclear weapon state in the capacity to put a nuke in a submarine, they were in the first place violating the NPT. And I don't see how a country in this theoretical construction of the question, I don't see how a country that is respecting its safeguards obligation could develop a nuclear weapon without the IAEA having an ability to, notice that this is happening. So I would go earlier in the question that is happening. Then there is the issue of the nuclear propulsion and what is on a submarine, but perhaps that is in another question. So
would you like to answer it now?
Are you asking me?
I will ask you. So obviously we have the AUKUS agreement, which will transition Australia from operating U.S.-supplied subs to AUKUS subs. We know Brazil is seeking this capability and is going, is pretty far down the track. And there are other countries that have expressed interest. So this is a true, non-peaceful but non-weapons use of nuclear material that the IAEA has a safeguards responsibility for. So how are those discussions going? Are you optimistic about the ability of the agency to meet the requirement on the timelines that the countries are seeking?
I'm optimistic insofar as the conversation is in good faith. If a country wants to have nuclear propulsion, it has the opportunity to prove it to us. And we have the means to offer a technological safeguards solution that will allow them to show their good faith. Then you can decline this, and you've been part of those negotiations, Corey, you can decline this into 100 technical, discrete issues that can be discussed. Because for those who are not familiar with this, when you have a nuclear sub, well, there's a lot of nuclear material that, of course, since this is a military vessel, is going to be out of sight. One of the beauties for the military, one of the beauties of these nuclear subs is that you cannot see where they are. They are for months on end out of reach of the rest of the world, including inspectors, of course, from the IEA. So what you have to have is a technological way to prove that every gram of nuclear material, highly enriched uranium, for example, that goes into that reactor inside the vessel, when it comes back to port, has not been diverted. Somewhere under the seas, somebody took the material and is making bombs somewhere. Yeah, okay, that is theoretically possible, and there are means to prevent that. So I say, I'm optimistic from the assumption that we believe these countries to be in good faith. They want that for the reasons that they have explained, which is for them to explain, and we're working. Does this mean that it's easy? No, it is not easy, because we need to be inquisitive. We need to be, because what we call, and I don't want to get too jargon here, the paths or the ways to steal material, let's put it in normal parlance, are many. Because you have a shipyard, you have a place where these vessels come, they are huge normally, they dock, they stay there for months on end, then there's technical refurbishment. So how do the watchdog can ascertain that there's nothing fishy going on? So we have to be inquisitive. We have to be very, very uncomfortable in asking questions. They will tell you, no, there's no problem here. You say, well, but there might be a problem. And this is the debate, the typical debate around safeguards, isn't it? That, as someone said, we trust everybody, but we have to verify. So, and sometimes that leads you to uncomfortable conversations. So not meaning or not saying that the conversations are easy, but they are with the AUKUS partners and with Brazil, very importantly, moving in a very professional way.
There are a couple of questions I'd like to link here. Braden Holt asks, how is the agency preparing its staff to operate in conflict zones? And there was a related question from Mark Shanfine, who asked, how does the IEA address the stress of the inspectors who have been serving in Ukraine?
Of course, we could not foresee the war, and we were, prepared for that. But so we had to just do it. Of course, working on the assumption of certain things need to be done in a certain way to avoid. But it was a transformative experience for us, and it is big, because we were transformed all of a sudden into an on-field operation. You've seen me there with bulletproof vests, with helmets, and so do
I want one of those jackets, by the way.
Yeah.
Who do I have to talk to?
They are very heavy. They are very uncomfortable. I can tell, especially the neck. You cannot move. It's quite horrible. But anyway, and we were under fire on more than one occasion. On more than one occasion, I want to pay tribute to our safety experts and inspectors. That I must tell you. Of course, when they signed up to come to Vienna, work for the IEA, they were not expecting to be in a war zone. I can assure you. And this operation, of course, because I am the manager and I have a legal responsibility on them, I have to send only volunteers. Of course, And I can tell you 3 years down the line, and I don't know how many, 30 or something rotations, I never had an opportunity or an occasion where I had to look for somebody. And I have people, so it's so moving to see them, because they know that they are writing history, and they want to come, and they want to return. And it's really moving. I am moved because it's really moving to see them. Christmas, like military, but military know what they are signing for. And these people are really inspectors for peace, as somebody put it in a book about the IEA some time ago. So they are there, they are doing it there. Sometimes they leave, and for those following what we are doing, we had a problem with one of the rotations because there was fire when we were trying to cross, and some had to stay for 3 months without seeing their families. And how are you preparing? Of course, we also had to look into that, and we have a team of counselors, psychologists, working with the teams that go out, the teams that come back. So I'm sure that we will have a lot of lessons learned and to share with the international community about how this is done. For the moment, we are in the middle of the action. We have to continue.
Well, it's a testament to the workforce
Yeah.
that you have so many volunteers, that you have people who repeat missions, and it is a commitment that they and their families are making to the greater good, and it's really, it is commendable. This is a new topic, but I know one that you've worked really hard on, which is Fukushima. There's a question from Taylor Loy that's asking about what have been the big challenges for the IAEA in dealing with the Fukushima cleanup and monitoring, especially the wastewater monitoring. And a specific interesting question, which is public perception. How have you been dealing with the IAEA having to be the validator to the public on behalf of a system that lost trust from a lot of
Well, exactly. You know, after the accident, a lot of water accumulated and was accumulating around the plant. You may have seen photos of those big tanks that were being added one after the other. Was entire fields of those millions of tons of water, contaminated water. This is water that was passing through the reactors, cooling them and taking, radioisotopes, and which could not be, of course, dispersed or discharged without further treatment, and were simply being accumulated. And there was, you can imagine, there was a big political discussion in Japan as to what to do. And so they came up with a plan to treat it, to cleanse it from the most dangerous radioisotopes that could be there. And so they handed on to us to make an assessment, an independent assessment. So what we did was we conducted that assessment. Took us almost 2 years to go through in detail what was being proposed. And then I went to Japan and I handed to then Prime Minister, the late Abe Shinzo, this. And what's important, and here I think there's a nice example, again, that we can extrapolate to the work of the IEA or international organizations when you can put something to add value to what is happening. The issue was that, of course, once Japan said, okay, we have this water, we have this nice method to clean and to get rid of all these bad things, we are going to start discharging it in the ocean. And of course, that created an uproar of concern. What is going to happen? And there were all these narratives that the Pacific Ocean was going to be contaminated, and you can imagine the fishermen, and you can imagine. And of course, there was a huge component of political discussion with countries in the region, China, the Republic of Korea. So you can see, don't try to make the alliances that you could believe are the obvious ones, that were crying foul, saying no, no hell, no, you cannot do this. And so I went to him, great statesman, and I told him, listen, you don't need perhaps to do that, but do it with the IEA. Because of course, you have all the expertise in Japan to do this and to check it, and you have a regulator, and the regulator is impeccable, and he's going to say everything is in order. But you know what? Nobody will believe you. And so praise to him and to his statesmanship, because he said, yeah, you're right. You're right. Let's do it with you. And this is why we could, I set up shop in Fukushima. I have an office there. I have a place which is protected. It's for us. We have our equipment. We have our labs. We have everything there. So for each batch, and I think they have already discharged like 11 batches or 12 batches by now, no single trace of tritium has been found. It's so low is the level of contamination that is. And the other thing, because China said we are not happy with this still. So we had to find ways to integrate Chinese experts into our teams. Then again, I went to my Japanese colleagues and said, let's open this. If they need to feel that they are part of it and that they are welcome, and of course there had to be some protocols because it's at the end of the day is within the IAEA mechanism, so because we have to protect the integrity so nobody tampers with the samples. And so we've done it, and I'm happy to see that at least on this, and I was discussing with Wang Yi the other day in Beijing, happy to see that they are, at least on this part of their very rich bilateral relationship, they are finding a place to see eye to eye, and some of the very, very, very heavy import bans that had with a huge economic impact on Japan that had been imposed by China because of this are being lifted. So I think we have here a nice example of how by finding creative solutions you can bring people together. So long answer to a short question, but I think it's interesting for the technical side and the political side that come together.
We do have a lot of questions back on Iran, so maybe I'll touch back on that. Could you say something, Melissa Alum is asking about the IAEA's role for verification of weaponization activities in Iran. And obviously under Section T of the JCPOA, the IAEA had some responsibility there, but do you think the IAEA would be prepared to play more of a role on weaponization or weaponization-related activities?
Well, this will depend, of course, like you are saying, this previous agreement had some provisions for these activities. These are activities for the audience and those who do not follow these things to understand. One thing is to enrich uranium, etc., and another thing are activities that are more, in the direction of developing a nuclear weapon. So there was a part, like you are saying, Section T of them. There was a part in that agreement which is no longer in operation that had a set of things, but there was never an operationalization of that part. There were never inspections of this. So I would say the IAEA could play a role in that, but this is of course something that needs to be requested by both sides, by both sides. So I think we want to be practical. We want to be quick in responding to that. It would be very difficult to agree to have some third party inspecting that part. The IAEA is there. We have the confidence of all the actors. So we could, but it would have to be. We know what is being referenced when it comes to possible places for weaponization activities. We have even visited some of them in the past. So we could play a role, but it's up to the United States and Iran if they come to an agreement to ask us specifically to do it. But we can.
So we talked about what might happen in Iran, but there are still some outstanding questions, and Kelsey Davenport has noted this, right? So could you give us an update on where we are on resolving the continued outstanding questions with regard to
it's part of Kelsey is right. I think there are many things that are still outstanding and that we are discussing. But I would say that on this, the whole thing on Iran has become like a whole package, if I can put it like that. So one cannot expect, realistically speaking, because this is a highly political, very sensitive issue, one cannot expect to extrapolate from the ongoing negotiation a part which of course they have to be answering on to the IAEA and have a bright, successful sub-negotiation while the big thing might go boom. So we have to be realistic, common sense. So we are pushing, we are asking Iran to reply, to give us, for a long time already, it's basically about traces of uranium that we found in places that we should have not found. So there was something going on there. And this is what we have been asking them, and some other things. But my impression is that if we are successful if they are successful in their negotiation, I think things will move together, and we will have a better possibility to avoid war.
Yeah. As we continue our tour around the garden spots of the world, we haven't talked about North Korea.
No, we haven't.
I know for a long time you maintained a capability kind of ready to go in case there was an opportunity to get back to North Korea and to provide either resumption of safeguards or some new monitoring mission there. And Ankit Panda has asked specifically about the revelations of new enrichment capability, and especially as that follows statements between Russia and North Korea about cooperation. So could you talk a little bit about what's your posture towards North Korea right now, and is it a good use of resources to stay ready, or how do you think about that?
Oh yes, it is. Let's not forget that the IAEA is the only international institution producing technical reports on what is going on there. We have, of course, a lot of expertise, a lot of people talking about these things, and that's very necessary. But we have been following this for many years. We were there until the moment they expelled us from there, and we have continued following this. The program from the 1990s has spawned. It's not just about the old Yongbyon complex. It's about light water reactor, is about 2 new enrichment facilities, perhaps a third under construction, is about other sites in the country, is about the reprocessing campaign ongoing as we speak, is about all of these things, apart from, not to mention things that are not under my purview, like ballistic capabilities, etc. So it has become a very big issue. I have been advocating for engagement. I think engagement is absolutely necessary. Without engagement, we are not going to make any progress. Let's measure and put our I would say, bars for what progress means. For some, it's a matter of denuclearizing completely North Korea or the Korean Peninsula, or, in all the forms that this has been discussed. The issue is that we have a country here with, I don't know how many, 50, 60, there are different calculations. We have our own on the basis of our estimation of the throughput and the capacities of the facilities there. So I think engagement is very important, and diplomatic and presidential diplomacy is very, very important. I, for one, believe that is a good thing if President Trump talks to the leader in North Korea. I don't think it's a bad thing. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very good thing. I think they should talk. They should talk more, maybe. It is good, and I hope there will be a possibility, and like it's happening now in Iran. I think the fact that the US and Iran are talking directly, indirectly, semi-directly, it doesn't matter. I think what we need is the engagement. So
we've talked a little bit about at this conference quite a lot about potential civil nuclear expansion globally. And I know that there's been kind of an evolution in the IAEA's role with regard to that. In particular, the ability, as you've mentioned in some other cases, to work with companies directly, not always going through national authorities, et cetera. So what do you tell your teams about how the IAEA needs to be poised to both engage currently and be prepared in the future? And there are lots of questions that touch on pieces of this here, but especially for the non-light water reactors and kind of some of these
I think we have to be engaged with everybody, because the IAEA has the advantage of being the place where everybody feels comfortable. Mm-hmm. All right? So we have the regulatory family that comes to us, and we talk to them for years, and we set the safety standards, etc. We have the governments themselves, so we get the temperature of the political sensitivities here and there, not only of the big vendor countries, but especially those, and we were talking about that a few minutes ago when we were talking about the SMRs and all of that, the countries that want some nuclear. The thing that was missing was the private sector. And nobody, at least from the IAEA, was talking to them, and I embraced them. And I think they are happy that they have a place at the table. For example, we have an important process ongoing, which we launched, on regulatory harmonization. So the fact that the regulators will accept more easily, or at least have a leverage what other regulators are doing, it, and industrial standardization. And we had, for the first time, a real negotiation where we have the private sector, their regulators, are the governments. This is, I think, the kind of process that you need with an activity that it is from a big part driven by the private sector, at least in the Western world. So it is indispensable. And if you miss that, then you have, I had, when I started, lots of complaints from private companies about the approach the regulators have. They were accusing the regulators of asphyxiating them with over-regulation. So is it true, not true? There are many, it's a whole debate, but it is excellent that we are, the atmosphere has changed completely. I saw yesterday, it was right, the new NRC head, who has a very dynamic approach to these things and is very welcoming to this conversation. So I think things are evolving, and we need to recognize this necessity to have the different strains of the things, so it can move forward in a successful way.
Do you have the people to do it? We heard Commissioner Hansen say yesterday about the people challenge on the regulator side here at the NRC, and I mean, obviously you have some amazing programs to bring the next generation in, and I think with the Maria Skłodowska-Curie program, but how are you making sure you have the people you need to do all these things that we're talking about?
Well, I think we have the people. I mean, perhaps the normal thing will say, no, we need more budget. No, I think we have the people.
Okay.
The IEA is roughly, I don't know, 2,600 people, 2,700 people, and we can draw also on the, like you did, you were giving us American experts for specific missions, and I think this will continue. It also, is related to your previous question about the budget. I think, of course, there are things that may need additional resources, but we need to read the signs of the times, and be intelligent about that. And so I think the member states expect us to do more with less. Yes. So why not? Of course, there are limits to certain things, but I'm confident that we have good teams in place that can do a lot. I'm pretty confident. And of course, we are, like you said, we are having fellowships. We are trying to educate the new generation. We are inevitably passing the torch to a new generation of people that are going to be driving all this thing, the nuclear energy and all of this. And I'm incredibly confident. It's very nice to see. When I go around the world, I love to go to universities, and I mean, a generation of young people that are so enthusiastic. We didn't have the time, and perhaps it's for the next one, fusion. You have, fusion was the energy of the future that would always be the energy of the future, wasn't it? So not anymore. Not anymore. And you have here in the United States, I've been in New England, places where, you have thousands of young engineers. And, they look at you and they say, you know what? We're in the market in 7 years. Will they do it or not? I don't know. And there is money, there is investment behind it. And mind you, this is why we also established a World Fusion Energy Group that did not exist. And I brought the private sector and the regulators and everybody else to do it. And we started in Rome last November, and we see, the big oil companies, for example, they are investing in fusion. They say perhaps fission, not so much, but fusion, perhaps, yes. So they are putting money. So very interesting configurations that are coming together that we have to be following.
So we have 1 minute left, and I have 1 minute, a 1 minute challenge for you.
Okay.
It feels like given gridlock and geopolitical strife, tends to be a feeling now that the time of the multilateral organization may be past, right? This was a post-World War II structure that worked for a long time, and maybe it doesn't work for the current world. Can you tell us why multilateralism and multilateral structures matter so much now? Well,
I think I just told you.
That was faster than 1 minute. Yeah.
So I think I like to, give examples, not visions. People are fed up with that. Give examples. What are you doing? How did you do it? And what are you planning to do? And there, I think we can draw a reasonable conclusion that the multilateral idea is still valid today.
That's great. You've given me a gift today, which is I now feel like I have the right phrase to describe the feeling in my stomach when I'm not sure if I'm excited or scared, and it's fraught with opportunity.
Fraught with opportunity.
So I wrote it down and I'm going to use it.
Good.
Please, everyone, join me in thanking Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi. And I believe we are all now on a break.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will take a quick
Great.
break.
I mean.